My name's Tim Day, and I'm going to talk to you guys about testing and DevOps and a couple other things. I'm going to try and leave a whole bunch of time for Q&A at the end, so you can ask me about whatever, really. There we go. I am screen sharing, right? Okay, good. I'm seeing dots. All right. For those of you who don't know who I am, I went to Drexel for a good long while. I graduated in 2015, or I finished my undergrad in 2015 in computer science, and then I joined the digital media PhD program for a little while. Decided that wasn't for me after about 3 years, and got my master's and left. During some of that time, I also taught some classes in digital media. I was at Drexel for a long time, for like 8.5 years. I was one of the founding EGS members. It's sad that you guys are moving the EGS space. Like the Mario jumping into the void sticker, like I put that up. So that's kind of sad, but at EGS, I started Sweetroll Studio. Sweetroll, we released 3 games, which I believe is still the EGS record. Somebody needs to beat us. I had a couple extra years as a student, which helped, but somebody's got to beat that someday. And currently, I am a software engineer at Magic Fuel Games. Magic Fuel Games is a mobile game company. We were based in San Leandro, but now we're mostly a remote company. And so I actually live up in Seattle and work for them, which is pretty cool. So we're a mobile company. We've released 3 games so far. Our first one was called Fort Stars, which is pretty cool. And currently we're working on a city builder. So I want to talk to you guys about testing and DevOps today, and I want to tell you why. I don't know how many people in the audience are rising seniors that are going to start their senior design process come the fall, but all of you will get there eventually, and I hope you guys all take this to heart, because it was really fun. I got to be a judge in the CCI competition. I watched the digital media showcase and slightly participated in that. I got to say, testing was maybe they all understood it really well, but the way it was presented was as if they didn't understand it very well. So I thought this would be an interesting topic, and I'm going to try and weave some nuggets that might help you stand out in senior design and just in general, really. And then also, this is something that I wish I knew more about as a student. All the different kinds of things you can do, you don't necessarily learn about just because maybe they're not relevant. I mean, there's a lot of them, as you'll see. What we're going to do is I'm going to talk about some testing, all sorts of testing. Then I'm going to talk about DevOps. If you don't know what that is yet, I'll explain when we get to it. And then, like I said, I hope to leave most of the time for Q&A. So let's just get right into it. Before I go on, I want people to think about, like, what's the first thing that comes to their head when they think of testing? I'm being purposely vague. Testing can mean a lot of things, but what is like the first thing that comes to your brain? You might be thinking about like sending surveys to people who've played your game, all that sorts of stuff. And those are probably all things that are part of testing. But at least for senior design, play testing was, if it was there, that was all you'd see generally. And so I really want to talk to you guys about all the other sorts of testing you might see. So you might do some concept testing. You might do some prototype, A/B, QA testing, which is not really a specific type of testing so much as a discipline. You might have heard about unit testing. There's things like release, load, and migration testing. There's like infinite amounts of testing. And each of these are probably their own discipline in their own right, but I want to get you guys to think about things other than just playtesting. Not that that isn't important. And we're going to talk about playtesting as well, too. So concept testing. So in the senior design process, they make you you're supposed to kind of do some market research about your, I don't really want to say competitors, but other games like you out in gaming. And you're supposed to come in with that knowledge. It's in the rubric for the computer science competition, like doing this market research is like one of the bullet points you have to match up to. And so what concept testing really is I mean, you can think of it as kind of part of the ideation process, but it's a way to validate that like your plan or the thing that you want to build is worth building. And you could be doing all sorts of things. You could be surveying audiences. You might literally test concept art. This is something we did at Magic Fuel. We bought some Facebook ads. And in those Facebook ads, we would sometimes run them with different art styles. And we saw what people clicked on the most. And that helped instruct what we were going to do our art style for production. But specifically something concept testing can tell you is you're going to go, you might look at similar games or very different games, and you're going to find things they did well at. Particularly if you're making a mobile game and you go look at other mobile games, if you use sites like App Annie, you might be able to find specific key performance indicators, KPIs, that you can see, oh, how many people come back each day? Like after 30 days, how many people still keep playing this game? Those are all really valuable things. And, if you're talking to like a publisher, they might start asking you like, hey, what do you think the like day 7 looks like for your game? And you should be able to do some of that research. Now, some of this might be overkill for senior design, but this is a big part of what you'll do in pre-production. And this doesn't stop once you get into production. You keep doing this because maybe you need to change. This is something I really wish I knew a lot more about because it's really helpful and can save you a lot of time. And this is really to get over the idea of just using your gut as to what's going to be good. This lets you validate your ideas before you even have to start building them. So I mentioned some of these already, but in the senior design part of this, like every team would mention that the video game industry made billions of dollars last year, which is, when you like read the articles about video games and they still say at the beginning of every single one, like, we've come a long way since Pong. I think we're a little bit more advanced than that at this point, and we can be a little bit more specific than the video game industry made a lot of money. Also, like, think about the platform you're going to. If you did all your research about Switch games, but you're making a PC game, you should the platforms are very important in that discussion. Also, like, you should have compared multiple concepts. I know the rule of thumb I always have heard is, you want to compare 3 good ideas. This goes from like your base idea, but like even when you're comparing the concept art, that's a good rule of thumb to follow. Some do more, some do less. But if you only are testing the one thing, particularly if it's a failure of what you're trying to reach, that your time could have been better spent. And then finally, don't skip this because some teams didn't have this at all. So prototyping. Prototyping is arguably just a more technical form of concept testing when you think about it. And this is really about actually applying some of your concepts, building it, and testing it for a couple different reasons. You might test it just to find out if the thing is fun or not. That's a totally valid reason to prototype. You might do a paper prototype for that first even. You want to assess technical feasibility. Maybe there's a really hard problem to solve in your idea and you need to check to see if you can actually do it. And if you can't, then maybe you need to change. There's all sorts of things you might prototype for. And like I said, I consider this really a form of testing because you are validating, you're trying to validate an approach for something. And if it's not valid, you have to come up with something else. So it's really about failing quickly, testing some assumptions. At Magic Fuel Games, we really prototype the hell out of our current project for like almost like a year on its own, which is maybe a little atypical, but that was really, really helpful. I personally got to lead the development on that, which was really, really cool. I got to go to China out of that even, which was a blast. The art here, by the way, is from, if you guys ever played the Dota Artifact card game, when they re-released it or tried to re-release it, at first they had prototype art like this because going too deep didn't matter. They were just prototyping a new game system. So they had, I think engineers just doodle new cards when needed like this. Okay, so A/B testing, this is probably something you guys have heard of for sure, I'm guessing. And this is a really broad thing in and of itself. You might do it for a million different reasons. You might be A/B testing just as a way of doing your concept testing. You might be doing it in production to test certain things, but really the idea here is that you're going to pit two things head to head against each other. And what's important when you do this is that you know how you're going to determine what wins, like before you do the test. I mentioned KPIs earlier. Those are things you'll generally want to pick because that's going to be how you evaluate and decide what is working and what's not in your game. So with A/B tests, you might pick certain ones of those and you want to see which one moves it in a positive direction. For engineers out there, for people who are going to program, you should think about when you architect your systems, like, what if we need to A/B test this? What if I need to swap in a whole different system here? Or maybe it's just swapping art. It's worthwhile to think about how you might do that. And I will say a lot of like arguments you have about specific approaches, you're like, I've had arguments like this at work where it's like, I think this is the way to go. And then they're saying, I think this is the way to go. And both people have valid reasons and approaches for doing that. You should just test it at that point if you can. It is hard to develop and be ready to go with A/B tests, but if you have the option available to you, it's extremely useful because, as the comic says here, you can spend a lot of time just debating instead of just testing it and moving on. So A/B testing is pretty cool. All right, so QA testing. I'm being really unfair to QA here because it is much bigger than one slide. And they do multiple types of tests. My first job was working QA automation. That was my first co-op. And I've always had a really good relationship with QA. They do really important things. But I specifically want to call out some of the forms of testing they do. And these are maybe if there's anything I would say you absolutely need to do is you should really have plans for each of these types of testing. So there are things called smoke tests. You get a new build, you want to smoke it really quickly. You want to make sure, hey, this works. It doesn't just break when I hit a button in the UI. As you're developing new features, QA will be doing functionality testing, right? That's verifying that these new things do what they say they do. There is regression testing. Regression testing gets applied to all sorts of things, but at least in the context here, I'm talking about, this is them testing the game and testing that old things haven't broken since new things have come in. You can build tools to help with these sorts of things. The most basic tool you need, and you shouldn't build this because a million exists, is just a bug tracker. Like if you're not using a bug tracker, use a bug tracker. I would be charitable and say at a minimum use an Excel sheet to track the issues, but like, come on, things like Trello are free, just use them. You need a bug tracker. It's otherwise you're gonna just forget things, and that totally happens. This is a very, very brief way of talking about what they do, like. Regression is one that I always find weird because people will call all sorts of things like, I found a regression in like a totally new feature, which doesn't really make, like the word regression doesn't mean something new. It's anyway, I digress. Let's move on to unit testing. So unit testing is a bit of a dirty phrase, particularly to producers, I'd say. the most simple way to put unit testing is it's code that tests other code. Usually it's a pass-fail, and what you do is you'll make a whole bunch of tests, and you ideally are running these automatically, like whenever you make a commit. So it's really powerful if you have a continuous integration loop. But I'm going to talk about that later. And if you've heard of the term test-driven development, it usually means you are building your unit tests first, and then you build the code that the test is testing. The reason why this is sometimes considered like a dirty word is because it's really hard for games, is what a lot of people will say. And the reason you'll hear this thrown out is that it's, oh, you know, the user can put in input in any crazy different order. And that's true. Users can do weird things. They can do that in other software too. But in games, yes, there's a lot of agency that can make it hard to make a unit test for every scenario. But you're testing very small things. You also don't have to test everything. You don't need 100% code coverage. That's often like the, you know, pie in the sky goal, but you don't need that. Any amount helps. If you're using Unity and Unreal, they both have unit testing systems built in now. I'm a bit of a hypocrite because we don't do unit testing at Magic Fuel. We should. It's funny, like at the beginning of every project, we're like, gee, we should do unit tests. Because they give you a good idea of the health of the project. If a unit test fails that was previously passing, that is a regression. Sometimes unit tests are called regression tests specifically as a result. Anyway, they're very powerful. The team that won the computer science senior design competition was the only game team that had unit testing. So I've lumped all of these into one slide. They're spiritually kind of similar, even though technically they're not. These are more specific, and there's a lot of these more specific types. But these in particular are useful if you're making like a living game, which I didn't do very often in school. Opportunity didn't necessarily arise, so I never really thought to look at these sorts of things, but they are out there and it is helpful to know about them. So as you're going to come up with a new version of the game, you're going through release testing. You're going to go through maybe some different environments you have set up for different amounts of testing and stability. And you're going to test those at each stage. And maybe the process of moving between those environments introduces bugs. Load and performance testing. Load is, I guess, really a type of performance testing when you think about it. This is making sure that the game doesn't run like crap. Load testing is specifically trying to stress out the systems of your game. This is most often for multiplayer games by usually simulating, sometimes running a beta of having tons and tons of users use the system. But you can apply this to like a single player game too. You know, you can stress it with a lot of different inputs and things like that. And then there's migration testing. And migration testing is, let's say you're going to deploy a patch to a game that's going to change some user data. You might need to migrate the old data so that it works with the new system. A good example of this is that when World of Warcraft came out, everybody had a bag size, their backpack had a size of 16 slots, and they could never increase it because of the way the data was set up. Every time players would ask for it, they couldn't because the data was set up strangely, and every time there'd be a problem when they were testing it. So eventually they worked around it by adding like duplicate backpacks, and that's how WoW has a bag system now. It took them like 15 years or something to finally figure out how to add more slots to the initial backpack. So, you know, a lot of learning in the past couple of years about live games is ultimately about how you do migration testing properly, because it's really important. I personally had a really scary moment where I thought I like deleted a bunch of purchase history from users in Fort Stars. Fortunately, that didn't happen, but you got to test for that sort of thing. And this usually involves QA setting up a bunch of old accounts, and then you run the patch and you see if anything breaks. It's a pretty difficult one. But you also see this not in live games as well. If you're going to update your single player game and you're going to make some changes to how save data is stored, you don't want to break people's saves. So you need some way to adapt the old data to the new data. And you got to think about things like, what about the person who last played the game 4 years ago and now they're updating and now they have a totally different save system. And maybe your choice is tough luck for that player, but you do need to think about that. Again, these are for live games, which was maybe less relevant for a lot of the senior design games, but I think these are cool types of testing, if that makes any sense. And then finally, there is playtesting. This is like, if any of the teams really talked about anything, it was playtesting, and then it was a very slim part of this. I remember when I was an undergrad, to satisfy the playtesting requirements for a class, often it was like, I'll post the link on Facebook, I'll get like maybe 10 responses if I'm lucky, and then I'll scream at people in the labs to play it until I get the 10 I need to pass. Like, see, you should strive for better than that. I know it's easy to say now that I don't have to do that anymore, but playtesting is really useful. It maybe is the most useful of these types of testing for your student games. And really, like with the seniors, it would be like they have a really small amount of surveys. They would only have surveys. I got like deer in headlight stare when I asked one of the groups about if they gathered any telemetry. So if you've played a video game, I'm suspecting most of you have, if you've played a video game that like in the last 5 years, all of them are collecting data. You make a choice in a Telltale game. Well, probably not anymore because Telltale's gone, but when they were around, every choice you made got uploaded to their server, and they would look at all that data and see the choices people were making, and they would use that data to inform future design decisions. But as you develop and playtest your game, like on your survey responses, the more qualitative things, you might get a mixed bag of responses. They might lean one way or another, but hard data about what's happening in the game is really important. Maybe out of your 20 playtesters, none of them went down one of the choices you presented. So that should start to make you question, why is nobody picking this other option? Maybe that's what you wanted to have happen, but regardless, you should be collecting that data. There are ways to do that for free remotely. There are free telemetry tools, but it can be simpler than that. You could be writing out these things to a log and just ask them to attach it in the survey. I think if any of the senior teams had this in their presentation, it would have made them look really good. As it is, there was just a limited amount of playtesting. So just a brief recap then on testing. There's obviously a ton of types. I feel strongly that in some way, pretty much all of these should be something you think about in a project, if not actually employing. You're going to be doing some of these testing types before you start implementing the game, right? Concept testing, prototyping, all those things can be happening before you start your production. And I mentioned this before, but the CCI team that won was the only one with unit tests. There's a whole category about unit tests. They were the only ones that got points. They were the only ones that had it. So I would say for you computer science students out there, like unit tests are a requirement right now, and you should treat them as such. So that was a lot about testing. Maybe I can take one question or two specifically about that, and then I can move on to the rest. I can also just power through and save the time at the end.
I was curious if there was any software you specifically used for, I know you mentioned Trello for creating, like, I guess, regression tests and like regression test tickets, because I've used software that's paid, but I haven't used anything free.
So we use Jira at work, which is not free, and Jira is a pain. I mean, you could have a talk all about this software. I know Hack and Plan Is HackerPlan still around? That was free once upon a
Yeah,
time.
we use it at SymphonyHL.
That's what Gossamer uses.
Yeah, HackerPlan was pretty cool. But I mean, there are a ton of tools. We used Target Process for a while. Fogbugs used to be really popular. I think it got bought and is renamed to something else that is still kind of popular. There's like infinity of them. But I mentioned Trello as the minimum really because it's free. It's not really bug tracking software, but it's better than nothing.
What about the open software stuff, like Mozilla's bug tracker?
Oh yeah. Oh gosh, what is Mozilla's one called? I think they've got one that's open source and free. GitHub and the like often have an issue tracker built in. You can use that. There's a whole bunch out there. I mean, if you just Google free bug trackers, I'm sure you'll find a million. I've used GitHubs and GitLabs in the past. And I've used Trello in the past. Sometimes you want to use multiple, which is a little crazy when you think about it, but sometimes it's the right thing to do.
And Tim, this is a question I want to ask, but feel free to put it till the end. And the question is, you've gone through the senior design process and are very familiar with the system, and also having judged both CCI and set in on the digital presentations and so on. So I want you to think about all the different type of testing that you listed, which are absolutely important and wonderful, especially for companies like Gossamer and others to sort of think about at a professional development level. But from a senior design group point of view, where they are sort of time limited with classes and other stuff, what would be the most, I guess, return on ROI?
Yeah.
What would you focus on? So I want you to kind of think about that and maybe address that as you come back to the end.
Yeah, remind me about that at the end. I have a couple more senior design specific thoughts.
Okay.
And if I forget, please remind me. Let me get through the rest of it here now, and then any question you guys had, please bring them up at the end, and I'm happy to answer them. Okay, so let's talk about DevOps. I don't know if everybody even knows what this is. The icon on the right here is kind of the Jenkins icon. People might know what Jenkins is, and it goes hand in hand with DevOps. So unfortunately, DevOps doesn't mean anything. You're probably going, oh no, of course it means developer operations, right? Apparently it doesn't. I was trying to find an actual formal definition of DevOps, and like the Wikipedia page said there's really not one. At least the way I'm going to refer to it, I'm really going to be talking about like project infrastructure. I didn't do a lot of research on the history of the word DevOps, but that would be an interesting follow-up topic if anyone's game. I think depending on who you ask, it means different things too. But I am talking about project infrastructure really. And in particular, the tools you might use to go from submitting a new change all the way up to a release. Sometimes that whole process is just called continuous integration. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to run you through an example of how we go through a dev cycle at Magic Fuel and how we use a bunch of automated tools and systems to go from like planning our sprint to releasing it on the App Store. So when we're in development, we'll have a cycle that somewhat looks like this. So let's say I'm talking about what happens when I submit something. I'm going to submit a change list to our version control system. We use Perforce, and we use it as a trunk-based model. The terminology there is not super important, but if you use Git, you're probably using a branch-based model. Trunk just means we always submit to master, for those of you who are hip to Git. It doesn't really mean that but it kind of means that. Anyway, so let's say I submit a new change on our main line, our master. Immediately, our tools are going to go into action. We use Unity Cloud Build to actually build the application. Unity Cloud Build is going to automatically pick up that there is a new commit, and it's going to queue up some builds. If more commits come in while those builds are queued, all of them are going to be put into that first build. That way it's not wasting and building a bunch of extra stuff. Now at commit, unit tests should be getting run. We don't do unit tests, but you should be doing unit tests. And if you were doing them, they should be run as you commit. And if there's a failure on the unit test, you would have a tool that then screams at the person who broke everything, and they would fix it. Or you would just reject the change completely. But let's say I had a good change. At the same time as the app build going, we trigger a data build on Jenkins. Jenkins is like the king of DevOps tools, really. You automate a million different things through it. Most continuous integration loops involve Jenkins somewhere. Some of you out there may have even used Jenkins at this point. But we have to separate our app and our data because there are platform limitations. So all of our content gets built separately. And that is a process that doesn't necessarily involve Unity. Then we have a development server for the mainline branch. That'll get updated automatically. When the builds are done, they will be automatically uploaded to Google Play and the App Store, and the data will be uploaded to wherever it's appropriate. We have, when we're in the US, we store it on AWS. If we're releasing a game in China, it might be somewhere else. And then once all that's done, we get a message sent to Microsoft Teams that says, hey, builds are ready for testing. And this happens constantly, 24/7. We have a remote team in China, and when they submit, the same process happens. And this way, we always can go to the Play Store or whatever and download the most recent build and play it. No developer has to sit there and fiddle with the build menu in Unity. The only time we do that is when we are debugging a bug and we need a local build. So we'll do this process, right? Our sprint is just a ton of this, and we'll flag bugs and we'll fix them. And then when we get towards a kind of a team release, every week we do one of these. It's called an LKG, a last known good. This is the idea of if there's a bigwig that walks into the office, so to speak, tomorrow, this is the last good build that we would hand them and say, play this. Whereas on the previous slide, we might be submitting works in progress in some cases. So now we have another environment that we call staging. And what we're going to do is when we reach the point where we think, okay, things seem stable in the dev branch, we're going to merge it over to staging. Again, we do unit tests. I mentioned earlier release testing, right? As you go through the different environments, bugs might get introduced simply from the way things get merged, and you need to check for that. So unit tests that passed previously might fail for all you know. This could be because of merge conflicts you have to resolve. And then we go through the same automation steps. This just hits a different endpoint. This hits the build automation for staging and the uploading for staging. And then we test this build. We smoke test it specifically because a lot of the feature testing was happening in the main line. And then assuming everything checks out, we say, okay, here's this week's LKG, and that's what we play test over the weekend on, for fun. But if the testing finds issues, we go back to the beginning, but this time we're only going to take specific changes to fix the issues, to make the build as stable as possible. Because while we're going through this process, developers might already be moving on to the next set of features for the next sprint and the next release. And then beyond this, we might be doing a release to the public. This is where it would go out to players, and it's not just internal. And so we would be doing those last two processes over and over and over again, and then we would find a candidate from staging, and kind of what we did to go from our main line to staging, we would then go to release. And same thing, we do all the unit tests, we do all the automation. And now we've updated the app and we need to deploy the patch. This means turning the server off. We're going to run migrations. I didn't mention it in the previous steps, but the migration testing would happen usually, particularly in the staging. For us, in our developer server, we'll reset everyone's accounts at the drop of a hat because you can just cheat yourself to whatever you want. But when we're going to go to a live game, right, we don't want to break people's accounts. So we would run the migrations here. Then we would use like some sort of like developer backdoor to get into the live servers and say, okay, everything looks good. And then we would turn the server on and players would ideally flock in the millions and spend a lot of money. I have had, it's been pretty cool. I've gotten to work with a bunch of developers from Maxis, and they talk about their horror story of releasing SimCity 2013. They often describe it as like their the darkest moment of game development they had. For those who don't know, it had a particularly rocky release. So a lot of them really like to teach and talk about this stuff because they've really been through the ringer on it. We, just to give another view of kind of those flows, we keep track of all of our DevOps in a spreadsheet with every release. And this is just kind of going through all the steps. Most of these steps are happening automatically. We're just checking them off just to say, yeah, it actually ran. And we're checking, we're going to check the logs, make sure there weren't errors or things like that. So with that huge example in mind, DevOps is really like all the development and everything that goes into supporting that massive amount of infrastructure. As a result, this is a discipline on its own. We have an engineer who basically spends his full time on this, and he almost never touches the games because he's working on the infrastructure. I realize that a lot of this stuff is really hard in a student team. I'm not expecting you to have all of it. But at the same time, it's not as hard as you think to have a continuous integration loop. Unity Cloud Build is awesome. It doesn't cost money, but I would strongly encourage you, if you're on your senior design team, to see if you can, scrounge up the $10 a month between everyone on the team. Split it, whatever you're going to do. You don't need a ton of capacity, but something so that you constantly have that running. If you're not in Unity, oftentimes you can just use hooks from GitHub and things like that. You can make your own build automation with Unity, but it's a lot more complex. I don't know enough about Unreal. I looked into it. They have some stuff, but not a ton. Nothing as easy as Unity Cloud Build for sure. Frank, you were asking about ROI on one thing. I would actually say a continuous integration loop and always having the builds available is maybe the biggest time saver you could have. The amount of time I remember spending fiddling trying to get the app version of my senior design project, Level Sync, to work was really high. It would seem like something would consistently go wrong, but Unity Cloud Build builds to iOS perfectly every time. That would have saved so much time. So, and I will say, again, the only team that had a CI loop of the game teams was the one that won. Because again, there was a whole form in the metric part, or sorry, whole, bubble in the form for judging, kind of about your infrastructure and CI loop. And the teams that didn't have any of that, they were at a disadvantage, even if their game worked 1,000 times better, right? DevOps is a lot of stuff, and it's essentially just a giant collection of tools to make releasing the game easier, in a sense. There's, like I said, there are people whose jobs it is full time to manage these things. And yeah, there might even be a whole team that does it. And so, just to kind of wrap up everything here, I want to reiterate some things. Playtesting is great. As far as your overall testing strategy, it needs to be a little bit more than just asking friends how they like the game. You should do more than that. I mentioned this before, don't forget what platforms you're releasing on. A lot of senior design teams just make PC games, and that's fine. But remember that when you do your research and things like that. And then finally, as I mentioned a couple times, the team that won was the only one that had continuous integration or unit tests. My senior design year, the team that won was the only game team that had unit tests. And I mean, that's just, from a practicality point of view, it's a requirement. So if you don't have it at all, you're going to get 0 points. Be prepared to talk about why you don't have unit tests, and maybe you can scrounge like a pity point. But if you literally don't have it and you don't talk about it, you're not going to get points. And then finally, just a bonus slide just of totally random other thoughts about senior design in particular, not necessarily to do with testing and DevOps. You guys are going to hear this a million times, but scope down. Like, your game's too big, make it smaller. I don't even need to hear your game pitches, and I can tell you they're probably too big. Also, really don't do a level-based game. I don't think you have enough team members to make enough content to do something that's really heavily level-based. One of the senior design teams last year was a 3D platformer with like 5 levels, and that's great and all, but A, 5 levels really isn't that many, but then B, they weren't the greatest levels either. And I don't think that's a good recipe for success as a senior design game. Something more sandboxy that works in a single area you can iterate on would be much better. Also, when asked about what their plans are to do with their senior design games after, none of them had plans. Some people hedged and tried to say, oh, yeah, it'd be great to finish it. But it was pretty clear that that wasn't really the goal. Now, all of you in EGS are hopefully already pursuing this, but I mean, I ask every single person at Magic Fuel, and they all say, if you want to get hired in games, have finished and released games on your resume. It's the best thing to have. It's you need it and the skills, but to stand out and to really get people to say, oh, yeah, let's talk to this person. Like, you should have finished and released things. A portfolio that's just full of unfinished student projects is common and unremarkable. I gave this feedback to the people running senior design. And this is unfortunate. I don't know if it'll result in change, but I will say senior design maybe overemphasizes novelty, focusing on coming up with something totally new. And I get that. I get why they would do that. It's cool, but I think that really conflicts with the thing that helps you get hired, generally speaking. Novelty is not a substitution of good execution, is what I would say. And then as far as tools like DevOps and everything, it's good to think of them as force multipliers. If your output is 0, a tool won't make that higher. But if you can make a tool to automate a process, it's just going to let you do so much more. And so constantly be thinking about tools you can build to make doing things easier. And then finally, conflicting with the scope down point, amusingly, is that you can actually get a lot done in a short time. And while people simultaneously overestimate how much they can get done when planning, I think they underestimate how much they can get done when they sit down to do work. You know, if you're sitting down and you're focused for 4 hours, you can crank out a lot of content and a lot of code. You just need that discipline. So, all right. Sorry, this went a little longer than I had hoped, but let me just open it up to general QA. I can stick around for a little longer as well. I don't have anything after this, so yeah, ask away.
Thanks, Tim. That was awesome. It was all very useful, very important stuff that I've been saying for 18 years. But and Tony have been saying as well. that just never goes over. I think every single GMAP, was it 260 intro game class that I teach, I would, when we get into the first game projects, I recommend not doing level-based games just because you just don't have time to do a good job, and you'll be compared to other much better level-based games out there. Just so this is your game right here. Don't break out of that screen. But that advice has been ignored more often than not. But anyway, I just want to make sure that people get a chance to ask questions. I have a bunch, but I will hold back because I can always talk to you. People here may not be able to. So please feel free to, I guess, unmic and just go for it. If there's a conflict, then I guess AJ or I could sort of pick someone to go first.
I do have a fun example of automated testing, unit testing, that we used to do at LucasArts when we were working on The Force Unleashed. We had this unit testing that we'd run every night when we left on our dev systems that basically simulated a game player just moving the joystick and slamming different buttons randomly. And every morning we'd come in to see if like the random player crashed or how far the random player got through the level or whatever. And every time it crashed, it would record that data and try to figure out what happened. And it was as useful just like having a 3-year-old randomly hit controllers all night.
I didn't mention it. I left it off because it's not every game. It's not suitable for every game, but sometimes that type of testing is called fuzz testing, where you kind of randomize the input. When I worked at Shenandoah Studio, that was my third co-op and then a part-time job, which was great. One of the things we did was fuzz testing, where to make sure that the rules for the game could adapt to different situations and things, we would randomize the map and just have the AI play each other constantly, just to find weird bugs. Not that we would ever design game maps to work in the way that random ones did, but it would help reveal vulnerabilities in your code.
And it seems like the key aspect of it is, especially return on time investment, is automated testing, right?
Yeah.
Try to automate as much as you can. And especially with that in mind, building in the infrastructure and the hooks so that you could do automated testing in your code.
Yep. Yeah. I think most of my times at work now spent engineering wise is really like making it so that we can do this process over and over again. We can change the balancing on it without requiring the engineer to reopen the code, type in everything again, just for one minor change. And it's making sure that it can do that is really where you spend most of the engineering time, honestly. So, because games are all about iteration. I personally feel like if I needed to, I don't know why I would, but if I needed to, I could recode all of Galactic Kitties, the first Sweet Roll game. I could probably code all of that in a weekend now, but like that ignores all the iteration to go from not having all that knowledge to getting there, right? So anyway.
And that's the reason why I keep telling people to just get your first game out of the way.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Don't hesitate. Don't pause until you feel like you have skill, because part of the learning process is how to make that game by making that game. So I would encourage everyone not in teams or not in incubation mode to try to quickly get into incubation mode, to get into teams, so you could make that game that now you could throw away. I mean, to almost some degree, so that you have the experience to make better games and so on. I guess one thing, as it's almost like there's a hidden, or it's very explicit, advice that Tim is giving people, especially people coming up in their senior design this coming year or the following years. Everyone will go through senior design, is how to maximize your chance of winning especially if you're working with CCI, which most game design teams do, to winning the CCI, which is explicitly include and talk about testing, because they are kind of checking off. And I remember being judged for a long time ago, things that you have and you have not done. And especially among the professional developers that will be there, like Tim and others, that'll be judges, they take the software design aspect of it, like testing and so on, very seriously. I mean, the game it should be fun, but I mean, it's really from the CCI point of view, the underlying process that you've gone through and so on. And I feel like this is also important if you're getting a job for you to be able to talk about the testing that you've done for your game is going to be important. And as also to mention something that I continue to iterate, and the whole vision of EGS is for you to publish a game. And that becomes essentially, I feel like, more important than many people realize, especially if you want to go into the game industry, or if you want to go into company, essentially, especially other companies and so on, being able to showcase the thought process and the detail and the journey that you've had in bringing a game to the end, whether it's in the App Store, on Steam, and so on.
So one thing that I forgot to mention, which particularly is relevant to the concept of testing. If you want to make a first-person fighting game on the 3DO, and that's what you want to make, go for it. I'm not going to say don't do that, but if you go concept test that, you're going to find not a lot of people are going to buy that. Or maybe they would. I guess somebody would need to go do that, but Tony would. But like, that's fine if that's how you want to make games. I think that's totally a great way to go if you want to treat it as a hobby. But if your goal is to have these games be successful and make money, so that you can continue to do it, you need to take the data you get from that seriously. If all your data is saying like, couch co-op games are a great example of this, and I've made one and ran into this eventually, where like they're really fun to make. You like to play them, and then you go look up the stats for how well they sell, and it caps out shockingly low. Like the best ones ever on Steam, I do like don't even hit 1 million copies. So it's like it helps you kind of keep your expectations in check. And if you start to look at what the ceiling is, and you realize, hey, I'm spending 4 years developing this game, and the best I'm going to do is X, Y, or Z, then that should help you reflect on the process you're taking. And like Frank said, just releasing games, not necessarily, it's not about the amount you do. You still want to release them at high quality, and if it takes the time it takes the time it's going to take. But again, if you're really conscious about making sure that you are making good business steps, you need to have that information, and you might choose to not make changes based off of it, but you at the very least need to collect it.